I doubt it's a surprise to anyone who watched anime this season, but summer was pretty damn stacked. That's crazy considering how garbage summers usually are, but I'll take it. Anyway, this is my bookend to my first look video I released back in July, this time giving my full thoughts on those shows. The ones I thought were good, the ones I thought were just okay, and the ones I would probably avoid. I find that works better than a whatever out of 5 or 10 scale. But before I break down summer and vague post about looking forward to fall, let's get the obligatory call to actions out of the way, since that's how YouTubers stay relevant these days. Hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on seasonal content from me, or if you like light novels, I do videos on those too. The good anime this go around was hard as hell to pick, because there was just too many to choose from. Yeah, we weren't wanting for bangers. Between action, comedy, fantasy, romance, horror, slice of life, there was plenty on offer and 0 ways anyone could walk away from summer 2025 disappointed. Assuming they weren't dumpster diving, of course. These are the anime I recommend people check out. So let's get into it. Literally no one should be shocked I'm recommending Dandadan's second season. The first was fantastic, and this one amped up all the weird and cool factors in all the right ways to make for an engaging watch as well as an excellent continuation. The story slowed down a tad this go around, but I think that was beneficial overall, as it let us catch up with the characters in their daily lives to remind us why they're doing all this crazy supernatural fighting shit. Okaru's seen some massive mental growth as he learns to fight to protect his new friends, and I will praise this series for Momo. In a genre where female leads lose their relevance, her being the powerhouse of their group on top of being one of the major impacts on the story is a breath of fresh air. Hell, I was even ready to hate Gigi after his introduction last season, but the dude quickly won me over with his incredibly big heart. There's not many anime that can balance the silly humor this show has with the emotional impact the story delves into multiple times. Those ghost fights hit pretty damn hard, and a major part of that is Science Sauter's amazing direction and animation. It's still here, and while the first few episodes felt pretty tame, they definitely stepped up their game as this season went on. I'm sure people are tired of hearing it, but Dandadan is peak. Go check it out if you haven't already. Call of the Night's second season was a bit of a slow burn after the first. We left off on a pretty big plot point, with the vampires finding themselves being the ones hunted by a detective that seemingly knows how to actually kill them. But this time started with a huge focus on Ko and Nazuna's relationship as he tries to fall in love and become a vampire himself. While that seems to have pumped the brakes on the plot, this series has always been a bit strange in how it tells its story as it bounces between genres almost on a whim, tying it all together expertly. What we're seeing is a lot of emotional and character growth from the two leads, as Ko comes to terms with him wanting to be a vampire and looking at Nazuna as a person, and she's confronting her past and her own relationships to that point, which sort of rounds out the central conflict of this season, as we learn more about who this mysterious detective is, besides nihilistic waifu material. It touches on some real trauma and mental issues that make the cast feel more real, like suicide, depression, and escapism, and I think that's why Call of the Night speaks so much to me. It's dressed up as a vampire romance mystery thing, but ultimately the cast are all incredibly human, with a strong focus on them as people. While I still like the style for this series, I did feel the animation wasn't quite up to par, especially in the second half, but it is still a nice looking series. Yeah, I'm hoping we get a third season, because this one had me hooked. Hey, it wasn't just season 2s that dominated summer, because I was kinda blown away with Secrets of the Silent Witch. Yeah, a solid fantasy series with an OP protagonist who isn't invincible, and thrust into a situation outside her scope, so she's actually struggling a ton. Great way to handle that whole one of the strongest mages in the country thing. Couldn't really just hand wave that away. Now, it doesn't downplay magic or anything. She is really strong and her magic is impressive. It's just not the tool that's gonna solve most of the problems that spring up as she guards the second prince from assassination attempts. And through that, we find a pretty complex political web, intriguing motivations, and some genuinely clever twists that made this series stand out. Monica is a fun character who, despite her amazing magical abilities, is an introvert who lacks communication skills, put into a noble boarding school where communication is pretty much mandatory. Seeing her genuinely struggle with the whole undercover thing keeps the story engaging, as we learn more about her past, the setting through these character interactions, and the mystery of who wants the second prince dead for what reasons. There's a lot going on, and it's told pretty well. On top of that is fantastic animation that captures the silly, light nature of the school scenes, while pulling out all the stops when things get tense for a visually interesting presentation. Insane this is by the same studio doing Reborn as a Vending Machine and I'm Getting Married to a Girl I Hate in My Class. but staff does make a pretty big difference, and the director here had a lot of control while also being incredibly talented. So it makes sense this one looks like it's by a completely different studio. This is an absolute must-watch for fantasy fans, especially if you're like me and hate modern trends in the genre. Yeah, zero surprises I'm ranking the second season of My Dress Up Darling highly. The first season was a great foray into a niche hobby, showing nerdy interest in a positive way, while building a solid romance base. Now the continuation of that hasn't shifted much in the overall story, but it's certainly showing some nice character growth for Gojo, as he's aware that the people around him aren't judging, and actually think he's pretty cool for how talented he is in the whole makeup and cosplay scene. It's nice that the guy is finally waking up to how supportive those around him are, since he was so deeply hurt when he was a kid for showing interest in girly stuff. But the highlight, at least for me, has always been his relationship to Marin. Her being the driving force in getting Gojo to open up about his interests and seeing a whole new world of possibilities is a great dynamic, while also bucking a ton of stereotypical relationship tropes that make this one stand out, despite how slow the development is on that front. I mean, we do see some progress this season, at least aside from her recognizing she does have feelings for the dude. Other than that, Cloverworks did a great job this season. As always, the series looks fantastic, with solid direction and animation making for an absolute treat to watch. I really enjoyed the various styles employed for each of the different franchises being cosplayed, making them feel wholly unique from the main art style in a way that added to the experience. This isn't my favorite romance this summer, but it's still a great series to watch, and one I'm recommending. Romance has been killing it the past few seasons, and that trend continued with the Fragrant flower blooms with dignity. While not a unique romance and using a fairly common setup, the execution and characters here are a standout. Kaoru is an absolute delight in this series, with a fierce positivity that literally brightens scenes, as well as bringing out the best in those around her, which is what finally brings the constantly gloomy Rintaro out of his shell. And while it focuses on romance and how the two leads come together, there are hints that the main dude is packing some trauma that's creating some realistic hurdles to their relationship. I always prefer internal conflict and drama rather than exterior being the driving force, and seeing self-doubt and personal circumstances being a wedge always gives a series more stakes for me than a third wheel cropping up. But while the story isn't the most standout aspect, despite still being well done, Cloverworks has really done it again. They went above and beyond on the adaptation. Wow, 2 huge romance series killing it this season alone, huh, Cloverworks? You should probably take a break. I don't want you guys getting burned out. Yeah, the animation is nice, but more in a subtle sense that gives scenes weight. Like how they animate eye lines and expressions really sells the emotions in this anime, and that also plays into the cinematography. It's not just solid animation, but in conjunction with the direction that makes this a fantastic anime. I always have a soft spot for romance anime, and this series was far and away the best in that department this season, even more so than My Dress Up Darling. It's been ages since we got a good horror anime, and by ages I mean I can't really recall the last one that was truly horror, and luckily, the summer Hikaru died actually lives up to the hype. The first episode of this left me with a positive impression, and as it went on, I was impressed with just how well it handles the horror genre. Understand, horror doesn't just mean jump scares. Despite what the horror indie scene would tell you, it's about unsettling or disturbing viewers to evoke a sense of dread or terror, and this is a psychological story that delves deep into a close relationship between 2 friends, possibly more with the clear queer undertones here, while also grappling with existential questions closely related to the ship of Theseus paradox. If someone has the appearance and memories of a dead man, is he that person or not? Hikaru's death isn't just the setup, its essential theme in this story is the thing that replaced him is looking for a place to belong, negatively impacting the world with its mere existence, and Yoshiki's both stuck clinging to this thing that's become his friend, while mourning his death all at the same time, all as they try to keep this a secret while the spiritually aware notice something is definitely up. Add onto that a mystery about the village's history, some secret ritual to appease a local deity that may or may not be the thing that's become Hikaru, and a really interesting story starts to unfold around the main characters, who already have you invested in their struggles. It's such a complex string of emotions that's conveyed visually in some impressive cinematography that's consistently amazing throughout the series. It constantly works to unnerve viewers in how it frames scenes, and adds layers to the dialogue. Seriously impressive stuff. I absolutely love how this was handled by Cygames. They've been knocking it out of the park lately. If you like horror anime, absolutely check out The Summer Hikaru Died. The second part of the second season of Toilet Bound Hanako-kun gave this series the final push it probably needed. I've praised it every time I've covered it so far as a quirky, fun, dark, and sometimes scary series that dabbles in a variety of genres well, while telling a unique story. But one minor issue I think plagued this series was overall direction. And after 36 episodes, we finally have some answers on where it's going, as a major part of Hanako's goals were always shrouded in mystery. The second half of this season stepped up the stakes while answering some questions and taking the story in a pretty unexpected direction. Now that the apparitions have been blocked from the real world and a rescue operation is underway to save Aoi, as well as contact Hanako, the status quo for the series has been thoroughly upended. Here's hoping a third season gets announced soon, because I'm curious where it's going from here. As for the art and animation, Lurch has mostly kept up the quality. The style does carry this series a ton, and I'm definitely a fan of it. This is an anime that has consistently made me happy to watch, so obviously I'm still recommending it. KyoAni was back with City the Animation as the spiritual and somewhat literal successor to Nichijou, and as a fan of that series, I was excited for this. But I do want to stress this is a spiritual successor, and while it will scratch that itch for Nichijou, it isn't a direct replacement. The humor in this one is weirdly more silly, and lacks obvious punching bags like Nichijou had for an overall chill vibe. It is a bit more extreme in how it runs its jokes through the ground as opposed to into it, but also more tame in how it tells them. So this certainly comes across as a sister series that has its own voice, despite being similar to the author's other works. As for the cast, they're much more varied, and that helped change up the jokes, while also adding a fun element in seeing how everyone relates to one another. But probably most importantly, I like them as people better than the cast in Nichijou, probably because they're softer around the edges, and there's a genuine good-hearted nature to their interactions. As for the animation, the animators were having a blast, and that comes across, not just in how they move, but even how scenes come together, sometimes literally. It's energetic, packs a solid sense of comedic timing, and looks nice to fit in with that almost picture book aesthetic the series is going for. This was an excellent pure comedy series that wasn't only fun to look at, but left me with a good feeling each week too. I was a bit torn on how highly I wanted to rate See You Tomorrow at the Food Court, but I decided it was one of the better shows due to how comfortable it was. My first look was a tad harsh, but it's got a chill vibe that's hyper-focused on the core concept, and executes that perfectly. Just two friends hanging out after school at a food court. There's a subtle but fleshed out relationship between them that makes their chemistry feel organic, while emphasizing the show rather than tell part of writing. Wanda's an abrasive, pathetic little chaos gremlin, but that's a result of her strict upbringing and being extremely passionate about her beliefs and hobbies. Yamamoto's apathetic archetype is a result of her big sister energy, but there's a good give and take between the two leads. What follows is a dialogue and character-driven comedy in an incredibly tight package that, while not flexing in the animation department, is still incredibly relatable. A lot of these conversations are shit I joked about with my friends in high school, or just bonding over shared interests too. The result is a cute, funny, and charming package that's full of memorable moments despite the mundane setting. While the animation's not blowing me away, it's still able to capitalize on the restrained delivery to make a massive impact. I'm both sad and happy this one only ended up being 6 episodes, as while I did want more, it also didn't overstay its welcome. For once, Girls Love fans were eating good. There's No Freaking Way I'll Be Your Lover broke a solid streak of awful Girls Love adaptations. But let's not kid ourselves, this is more comedy than romance. The unwitting chick magnet Renako, who keeps accidentally wooing the women in her life when she's just looking for a bestie, made for a somewhat predictable, albeit fun setup, where literally all of her female friends end up having feelings for her. Now, there is some subversion there to keep the formula from getting stale. Between Mai's unshakable confidence as she bulldozes into every situation to make a mess, Hajisai's closeted crush for our main girl, and Satsuki pulling off probably one of the best tsunderes we've seen in ages. And all of this builds to, I want to say an accidental, unwanted reverse harem? And that's played for absurdist laughs, but it's more of a mechanic to explore the characters' personalities and that thin line between close female bonding and actual love. Or, I guess I would like to pretend it's that deep, until there's a nude bath scene every other episode with titty fondling. This is a rare series that's funny, horny, and actually has characters you want to see get together, even addressing their toxic traits and establishing boundaries. As dumb as this concept seemed, I was impressed with the execution, both in terms of story and animation. Studio Mother might not be the most known for amazing work, but they're a studio that polishes their projects to a mere finish. Less sakuga, more consistent quality throughout, and this series looks better for it. An absolute must-watch for Girls Love fans. Goddamn, Ruri Rocks sorta killed it in the slice of life department. I didn't expect a show about hunting for rocks to be as engaging as this one was. But hell, I'm not upset about enjoying this. On the surface, there's not much happening here. There's no real overarching story, just some high school and college girls going out into the mountains on the weekends to hunt for rare minerals. Mix that with some science education with geology and meteorology, as well as some odd bits of history, and you get why sifting through some sediment in a river can be fun. Slight correction. Watching cute anime girls sift through sediment in a river can be fun. Couldn't catch me doing that. What sells this is a genuine curiosity and excitement in conveying information, but doing so in a way that's a journey for the characters and, vicariously, the viewers as well. But I would be lying if I said the source material alone was carrying this. It's definitely a unique blend where the core could be interesting, and was made that much more so by the animation studio behind it. Yeah, Studio Bind is handling this with pretty much the same enthusiasm they do with Mushoku Tensei, creating stunning visuals for key moments in this series. Like, there's a genuine appreciation for nature behind this production, and you can tell the animators took some of these shots as a challenge, especially capturing the reflectivity in these crystals. Absolutely stunning. Ruri Rocks is probably going to be my gold standard for cute girls doing cute things going forward, because it doesn't just rely on moe to hold your attention, while still being a damn good show. My biggest issue with the first season of Reincarnated as the Seventh Prince was, well, it was the fan service, but after that, it didn't really have a strong direction. Like, it was just, here's an OP dude, here's some demons, and he kills them because they're basically in his way to mastering magic. The story and world were afterthoughts despite this having some potential. But this season refocused on a tight story arc now that the introductions are out of the way. Like, we've got a mystery unfolding, a new powerful enemy who's a dark reflection of Lloyd, and the culmination of all the characters and powers introduced in the first season for a climactic battle. One that even gives the side characters a chance to shine, not just in combat. Hell, even the ecchi was toned down somewhat to not an uncomfortable level centered around an underage boy. So all that to say, my opinion has improved a ton, to the point I actually enjoyed this season due to how it had a story it wanted to tell, now that it has somewhere to point its quirky cast and cool animation at. I wouldn't recommend the first season on its own, but paired with the second, there's some good stuff here that's worth checking out. How can I even recommend the new panty and stocking with garter belt? No, I am recommending it. I'm just not sure how to even talk about this series. Small caveat, this is a parody of Western adult animation. Well, specifically, adult animated comedies. Its hyper-exaggerated use of English swearing, sexual jokes, and off-color humor are poking fun at how pigeonholed most adult media is in the West, while also still being an anime in its own right. All that said, this season, despite the huge gap, made massive improvements on the first. Like, I enjoyed the OG panty and stocking, but the series was incredibly repetitive with only about 3 or 4 episodes necessary to understand the story. And I'm using that term very loosely, mind you. Not that there's much more story this season. There isn't, but the quality of writing has definitely improved that the mini episodes are much more consistently entertaining. The characters haven't lost their edge, but I feel like I'm seeing more sides to panty and stocking this go around, especially now that Scanty and Nisax are part of the core cast too. Yeah, some of my favorite ones are where they cross team up, and also the introduction to the Poly Twins. Yeah, I absolutely love these two, so if you're a fan of old Trigger, and I don't mean new Trigger is bad by any metric, they're not, but more of how Trigger used to animate and structure their jokes, this'll be a return to form. Also, I love how they keep making callbacks to Inferno Cop. Rest in peace. And with that, we've made it to the middle of the pack. If the last section was what I recommend people to watch, these are the shows I'd generally say were okay. They just had something holding them back from greatness, so these are my conditional recommendations. Let's take a look. Welcome to the Outcast Restaurant had, I don't want to say potential, because there wasn't a world in which I saw this being amazing, but had a chance to be better than average. Unfortunately, it just settled for being mediocre. The core cast is fine though, only the androgynous mage dude, Lollybait, and Dennis stand out, leaving the rest to fade into the background. And what little story we got was coherent, albeit a pretty basic revenge plot. A ton of this series is built off the back of cliches, which isn't bad per se, and being that it's primarily a comedy, the shorthand there just kind of allows it to cut to the chase, but it also doesn't really help it be memorable or even get me to care. There's the classic sad backstories, found family, and big shot reveal points, but none of it really means anything when the first half of the anime is just gathering the 5 main characters, and then the second half is just kind of forced drama with their backstories. Structural changes could have helped, but mostly this just lacked a through line to tie everything together, until it's all haphazardly thrown in at the end that the guy who kicked Dennis out at the start was actually behind everything because he's a greedy psychopath. On top of that was just an okay presentation, so entirely middle of the road in just about every aspect. Yeah, this was the epitome of junk food, where it's not great, but it's also a pretty brainless watch, so it was easy to keep up with each week. I might piss some people off when I say the Water Magician was just okay, but honestly, this series' biggest issue was consistency. And when I say consistency, I mean just about everything. The story here is interesting despite the generic pitch, as it builds intrigue quickly, creates a reason for the main dude to start his journey, and his personality essentially sets him up to pursue whatever catches his interest. That leads to some slice of lifestyle episodes that build the characters and world, and some more plot heavy ones where we're suddenly dealing with some demons. But the main character going at his own pace means he's entirely unserious for pretty much the entire runtime. That makes him come across as apathetic or asshole-ish for no real reason, all while he's effortlessly saving the day. While that's annoying, that's not the series' biggest sin, as that would be his lack of involvement in the plot itself. Yeah, I'm more interested in what his friends are up to because they're actually doing something. So consistency in whether our main dude even is the protagonist, pacing problems, and really hard to pin down animation. There's times I think it's good, but also times I'm questioning if the studio is even trying. This is gonna sound so stupid, but I swear this paper texture is throwing me off. Like, it's distracting me with how persistent it is, and I can't really tell if they're doing it for style or to cover up their sloppy art. I kinda feel like it's both. The action scenes are almost good, but the quick pace in which they're wrapped up and limited sakuga really makes it obvious that they're stretched to the limit. I hear the books are better, but if you like isekai and fantasy, you'll like this too. Zero doubt on that. Betrothed to My Sister's Ex took a classic fairy tale style love story and made some interesting twists that elevated it on that front, but ultimately it just wasn't enough to stand out. Hell, that's likely because summer was so stacked, but I digress. I compared this to Cinderella in my first look, and that's not too far off. However, this runs into the same issue a lot of these abused girl romance anime do, that everyone starts coddling the lead to the point that it's almost patronizing. Like, it shatters my suspension of disbelief when she's cute, smart, and can do pretty much everything, but she was also abused, so everyone's constantly reassuring her in every conversation they have. Like, I have eyes, I can see her self-doubt. Hell, I can hear it too because of the fucking monologues. I don't also need every character in the scene patting around the back saying it's gonna be okay. But with the fairy tale vibe, I sort of expected a bit of a cliched romance, and it didn't disappoint. It's serviceable and I do like the cast. They are the saving grace. Hiro's is super doting, and Mari's struggle being more does she feel she deserves happiness at the expense of her sister's death. So there is some added complexity in there that beefs up this plot. As for the animation, it's not great, but I also wasn't distracted by the poor quality. Look, I don't expect amazing work out of every anime out, that's just not feasible. And this one's rougher line work feels almost like a stylistic choice, like they're going for a hand-drawn feel. But considering the number of lower quality anime adaptations I've seen using that in the past few years, I'm associating it with a cost-saving measure at this point. There were better romance anime out this season, ones that looked better too. But if you're into period light dramas, this one might be worth a look. The first episode of the Shy Hero and Assassin Princesses had me thinking this show would be peak, but the only thing that peaked was this show, unfortunately. It's not that the anime was bad, it's more that the first episode pulled out all the stops that I kinda saw everything it had on offer. And that's on top of the diminishing returns on animation. Look, I went into this expecting a dark comedy, but what I got was a slightly dark rom-com adventure thing. The assassination plots quickly fade into the background as the three girls all struggle with their feelings not just for Toto, but also this haphazard friendship that just kinda sprung up on them. And that's not a terrible direction to take this show. Hell, Toto actually got some character development, and I like the interactions between the rest of the cast. The real problem comes in that the series flip-flops on how serious the assassination attempts are, but not from the Cold War scenario it's set up in the first episode. More just, we can't let Toto die here or I won't be able to complete my mission from their random adventures. The sharp humor loses some of its bite as it goes on, and as I'm saying this, I think I'm realizing what my biggest issue is. It ran its course too quick for it to wrap up the plot. Look, it's not bad, it's just not doing anything exciting. which left me disappointed. If you like some danger in your rom-com fantasies, this could still be worth a look, but I just wouldn't expect it to wow you. Not gonna lie, I fully expected Ugly Mug Epic Fighter to be a junk food isekai, like absolute trash, but requiring so little engagement on my part, I could just throw it on and lose myself each week. That wasn't the case, as despite the escapist premise, the theme that one can't really run away from their problems, even to a second life, toxicity sometimes being a you problem all along, and the theme park nature of another world where seemingly all the people who have hit rock bottom end up, gave this a bit more meat than I was expecting, but certainly not an unwelcome surprise. Yeah, thematically, there was a lot going on here, and it's not completely uncharted territory for an isekai, but I won't say it handles it super well either. For one, the anime is primarily a comedy, so while it touches on some dark elements, and believe me, there's some dark shit that crops up, it never fully commits or seems to grapple with the implications. If it had either been a bit more sincere, or at least used them beyond window dressing to either get you to sympathize or show how evil a character is, it definitely would have been much better. On top of that, the dude being a literal almighty god is essentially too OP to even act, so it turns an otherwise straightforward issue into a roundabout solution that takes entirely too long to solve. Like, I figured out the mystery already, please wrap this arc up, I'm getting bored. So, pacing wasn't great, but I do think the thematic elements do put this above the vast majority of other isekais out. Just don't go in expecting too much out of it, you'll be fine. The second chorus Sakamoto Days was a lot more interesting from a story standpoint, now that the setup is out of the way, but I'm not entirely sure I enjoyed this more than the last. I think part of that is, while the story is ramping up, so much of this season felt unrelated to Sakamoto and his crew that they felt like bystanders in the first half, and the second half throws a ton of new characters at us that I'm not entirely sure who I should even care about. Plus, it's kind of an impromptu tournament arc sort of deal that doesn't really feel like it fits. I mean, it's fine, I still watched it, but I also get the impression it sort of lost sight of what made the first part so special. Probably because now it feels like there's too many people on par with Sakamoto out of nowhere. As for the animation, it's still as divisive as ever. Like, it's not pretty art and definitely has a dingy style, but there's some nice animation behind that still brings the hype. Taken as a whole, I'm not sure this core makes a better argument to watch the show than the first. I mean, it's still an assassin trying to live a normal life, just with some actual blood around him, because at its core, this is a shonen action series. I'm probably losing some of my worthless shonen trash street cred by rating Gachi Akata as mid, especially when I ostensibly like the show. So what's my deal with it? Well, let's talk positives first. The powers and setting are fairly unique, the animation looks good, it has a striking style, and more importantly, an actual personality. I like the post-apocalyptic street punk vibe this anime's got. It knows what it is and what it wants to do. Those are all things I usually praise, so why am I saying it's mid then? Well, the issue is, while those help it stand out, and it certainly does, a lot of that capital P personality is skin deep. What's beneath the surface is your Joe Naruto, the every shonen protagonist, learning a new power system to fight against some oppressive force as an underdog, and team up with a group of unlikely allies. While it has some unique twists on that formula, it still follows it pretty tightly. Ruto's a pretty standard shonen protag with just his special quirk that makes him the main character. Yeah, he's not particularly interesting, despite the world this takes place in having me invested. Like, the characters are probably the worst aspect of this show, because they're all archetypes rather than people, and if you watch enough shonen, you can kinda predict the plot beats based off that. Thing is though, for people who like shonen, this show is certainly great. Hell, just to be clear again, I did enjoy it, but it's just not striking me as special, even though so much in this show feels like it should be, and that's why I'm not putting it any higher in my rankings. Now, I'll definitely look like I'm disrespecting Kaiju number 8 by saying it's middle of the road this season, because I did that the last time it aired too, but I swear, I enjoyed it more this go around. The biggest issue is, it just had some stiff competition. Like, this season looks good, has hype, there's actual movement in the story itself, but we've also seen this type of stuff before, and there were other shows that were just better. I am definitely warming up to this anime more, as there's been some massive shakeups in the status quo, mysteries cropping up, some actual lore, and some more weight put into these fights beyond their just natural disasters. Or at least that's the metaphor. Now, most of that is all backloaded, and it's a pretty slow start this season for sure. But we'll see where it goes, I guess. Production IG is still doing some great work with the animation here. Both the look and action are nice. So, zero complaints on that front. I'm honestly kinda shocked at how little investment I have in this anime, despite having all the makings for the next big franchise. Let me preface this section by saying, I don't know if there were any truly bad shows this summer from what I watched. Hell, pretty much all of these would be just okay in a less stacked season, but there were a few that I didn't enjoy as much as the rest. These are the shows I don't recommend because there's just other, usually better offerings out, so let's get into it. I'll be honest, I'd hoped that Private Tutor to the Duke's Daughter would be okay, but there was a gnawing sense in the back of my mind that this would turn into a lolly harem bait show from episode 1, and that feeling turned out to be correct. That's not my only issue with this anime, mind you. The first episode promised a pretty interesting take on a fairly standard fantasy setup, but quickly devolved into girls throwing themselves at the main dude because he's the first non-blood related guy who didn't belittle them, and mostly unrelated daily problems that don't impact the plot for most of its runtime. Yeah, that just makes this come across as a bad harem. Like, I get it, the dude's a commoner with impressive skills, revolutionized magic theory while in school, and helped out all these prestigious families, so they're indebted to him. But I also feel like his story is much more interesting than the main heroine's, so why the fuck is it focused on these privileged girls too young for him crying sensei in unison because he patted someone else on the head? I said in my first episode review the cast could be annoying. Turns out they were. Aside from that, the plot just kinda meanders about while dropping hints about the main girl's magical power, but the mini-arcs don't contribute, feeling more like a slice of life school problems after the halfway point, when it desperately wants to be a romance and adventure show based on just how often it shoehorns in fights and magic. It's trying too much with little direction, a grating and tired cast dynamic, heavy reliance on ham-fisted cliches and metaphors, while also having its animation fall off after just a few episodes. Yeah, it's not the worst anime this season, but there were far better offerings out. I've given Reborn as a Vending Machine 2 seasons to shape up, and I just can't with it anymore. Like, it has an interesting premise and themes, but what little plot it tries to have just gets swept under the rug for episodes on end for seemingly slice-of-life subplots about beauty pageants or some shit. I'm so torn on how to even evaluate this anime, because it tries to be serious, only to undercut tensions by ignoring the obvious plot, but still wants me to follow it when it jumps back into it episodes later. And then there's the constant stream of one-note characters thrown at the viewer, but they're also not one-offs either. They're the recurring cast, but they just so happen to have one personality trait and a tragic backstory that doesn't match. Yeah, to be clear, this isn't comedy to brighten up a dark story, it's just a fundamental misunderstanding on how to mesh comedy and tension, which really ruins this anime for me. And that's all on top of a budget feel to the animation. Yeah, I think I'm done wandering the dungeon with this vending machine. I'm sure it has fans, even of the anime, but it's just not me. I think 24 episodes is a fair enough shot, so I'ma drop it. Aptly, Bad Girl didn't fare well this season, where Watanare was a fun but thoughtful girls' love comedy. This was just shoehorned in Yuri for the sake of it, and that's saying something considering it's probably a good 80% of the plot. This suffers from a lot of problems that 4-koma adaptations run into, and that's trying to fill a 20-minute runtime with a few chapters of a manga that only takes a few seconds to process. That led to glacial pacing for jokes, predictable dialogue, awkward dead space, and an incredibly one-note cast. You love Senpai, that's her entire personality. Her friend loves you, leading to her being jealous of Senpai, and Senpai's just kind of a ditz. It goes on like that for 12 fucking episodes. Not joking. Yeah, I really wanted to like this show. I did. It's a silly girls love anime. It should be fun. But I was bored stiff by the repetition as it constantly tries to outdo itself in mundane silliness, while forgetting about the core premise more often than I cared to count. Wasn't Yu's whole thing gonna be getting her senpai's attention by being a fake delinquent? Yeah, and she got it after maybe an episode or two, and then senpai's fawning over her like a lost puppy. Sometimes literally. The animation wasn't good either. It's on an incredibly tight budget with little elasticity to make these shots look alive. Kind of reminiscent of an era of shows like Lucky Star. You know, the late 2000s, early 2010s when cute girls doing cute things was fucking rampant. But this one doesn't have the exaggeration or cute to sell the comedy. So the biggest problem is, there was much better anime this season doing everything that this one did. So, not really worth checking out. Saying April showers bring May flowers wasn't good is really just a testament to how stacked summer was. Because any other time, this probably would have been just an okay show. But it was fighting against way better romance and rom-coms this season. So, didn't really stand a chance. The gimmick of the ugly girl getting a hot guy, putting aside how shallow that premise is, it essentially tackles that trope that hot people end up with hot people, as the ugly girl is super sweet on the inside, while the popular girl everyone fawns over in class is actually a shallow, stuck-up bitch doing an act to get the main dude's attention. It has some sweet moments, but they're few and far between, with the majority of the series spent on slice-of-life high school stuff until it's like, oh yeah, this is supposed to be a romance anime. Guess we'll have them get close or something. And I don't know, this was just kinda doomed to be cliched from the start, either leaning into the girl being ugly as a barrier to their relationship, which is fucking stupid, really glad it didn't do that, or going with the tired, she's ugly on the outside, but so beautiful on the inside sort of trope. The major issue is, I've seen pretty much this exact anime a million times, minus the ugly gimmick, which if it's not doing the concept well and the twist isn't carrying it, that just makes for an overall mediocre anime. On top of that, the animation, direction, and art style are lacking, making this anime bland visually with the cliched story, so even less worth a look. Just a plain forgettable anime I won't remember watching come fall. Alright, Nine Ruler's Crown is out this season. Yeah, I dropped that after the first episode. It didn't get licensed, and no one really seemed interested in fan-subbing it outside some cleaned-up Google-translated Taiwanese subs. At least I think that's what the subs were based off of. Look, doesn't matter. There wasn't a quality translation is my point. The first episode wasn't great in the first place, so I wasn't gonna go out of my way to track it down because, ultimately, it wasn't gonna be a hidden gem like Girls Band Cry that got overlooked by licensors in the West. It's just a shitty visual novel anime adaptation done on a budget in hopes of increasing game sales. So I skipped it after the first episode, and probably would tell people to do the same since finding it was already an issue in the first place. I struggled on whether I actually enjoyed cultural exchange with a Game Center girl, because while this show does some things well, there are still some massive issues with it. For one, let's get this out of the way. The main ship this anime pushes unapologetically is just plain creepy. Lily's 13 and Renji's 18. That's a middle schooler hitting on a college student, and the anime plays it pretty loose with how seriously he takes her feelings. Like sometimes he's aware she has a crush on him, other times he's just plain oblivious. The comedy aspect is repetitive as the anime only has 2 jokes. Everyone's mad at Renji for either being too considerate or not considerate enough of Lily. And Lily just kinda sucks at games. It's not really funny after a few episodes, but on the bright side, the English from the Japanese cast is impressively fluent. Like Lily's VA was actually raised in the US, so she actually makes an effort to speak with a British accent for her lines. But I think the biggest missed opportunity was Lily and her friends being the focus for this series. Like, just cut out the romance aspect. Doesn't really change much either. And this works as just a cute girls doing cute things anime with a twist. Seeing Lily become friends with her classmates was a highlight in this series, but one that comes just a little too late in it. As for the animation, it's not great, but also not distractingly bad. This is handled by the same studio as Joshin-chan Dropkick, and shares a lot visually with that series, both in terms of its cartoonish model and lighter color choices. Now that does work for this series, and they do use that style to its fullest, despite it still being a bit rough around the edges in terms of actual animation. As it stands, I didn't really like this show, but I'm also a bit sad because there were the makings for something decent here. Too bad it just chose to be creepy instead. Yeah, I couldn't really bring myself to watch any more Hotel Inhumans after the 7th episode, which, to be fair, I think is a pretty good shot to give this series. Not because it was so bad I dropped it, but more like it was so boring it couldn't keep my interest. I'm not sure if it was the slice-of-life hitman plot that focused on characters who serve hitmen, or if it was the constantly rotating cast the mini-stories focused on that made me unable to get invested, but this series was built on half measures. Like, they had a concept for a neat story idea, and then they crammed that square peg into the round hole that is the hotel's setting. It rarely actively involves the hotel staff, but it still tries to give them the character development because the killers all die at the end of their stories anyway, so zero reason to develop them at all. On top of that was an art style that didn't really fit with the feel for the show. With bright colors, simplistic models, and stiff animation, it doesn't work when it tries to be punchy with the few action scenes they throw in. The series is supposed to have this darker vibe, and everything's so bright and colorful. What the fuck? There's so many strange decisions visually, on top of this directionless, tonally confused story, that I lost interest entirely. There's better assassin shows out, still confused why that's a genre now, but whatever, so I'd give it a pass. Okay, if you press me if there was one anime I would say was outright bad this season, it would probably be Solo Camping for 2. The plot was this gruff dude gets strong-armed into escorting a college girl through the solo camping experience as a romance blossoms. Yeah, that premise is fine, but the character's not so much. The main girl is annoying as she has no clue about her chosen hobby. Like, did you research it at all or what? Yeah, I get it. She's meant to be the stand-in for the audience. She's the vehicle through which we learn about camping. But also, you know, it's fucking camping. It's not like they're going out into the actual wilderness. They're at campsites. Like, the huge lessons this dude imparts are, don't put your tent at a lower elevation in case it rains. No shit. The main dude we spend entirely too much time with and really can't stand him. He's got, like, not a tragic backstory, but personal reasons for why he likes camping alone. Sure, that's fine. But does he have to monologue endlessly about how awesome camping is? Like, specifically cooking while camping? Not really, which is why it's grating. Yeah, these two have zero chemistry, despite their friends, and the narrative itself pushing them together. And that's not even touching on the awful animation here. Characters snap into place, models just aren't appealing, and there's a definite budget feel to pretty much every frame. This anime lacks in so many areas, and I'm sure it has its defenders out there, but I can't see picking this up over any other camping anime in existence, of which there are plenty. So, skip. That's it. We've made it through summer, and I can't really see myself watching this many anime in a season again. 26, excluding the 3 I dropped, is pretty damn hard to keep up with on a weekly basis. But it was worth it considering how great this season turned out to be. But tell me your thoughts down below. What were your favorite shows? Hell, I'm sure there's even some I missed. I'd love to hear them. But for now though, hey, you've made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and do all the other YouTube stuff to help the channel grow. You can also join my Discord with a link down in the description, and if you really want to support me, you can head on over to my Patreon or check out my channel memberships and toss me $1. That way you'll get to vote on what I watch next season. That's coming up. And speaking of supporters, I'd like to give a special thanks to JMonth33A, Pokeflute, Robin DBL, Tristan, and Vonstrom for their continued support. Thanks for watching.